being worked on and such. You know, and they ended up making 6 Mega Man games on the NES, and most of them came out later and later after the SNES actually launched in 1991. They still had, you know, 4, 5, and 6 or whatever came out, I think, after the SNES was already out in Japan and in America. I always wonder what exactly they decided. I guess when they decided to do the SNES ones, they decided to just move on to a whole new series when they did Mega Man X, but then they still released 8. I just always want to know what the concept was, or what Capcom's whole thing was when they were working on these games. What exactly they were trying to come up with, or how many did they actually want to make, how many, you know, did they just kind of get forced into making because they needed games and such. Okay, Needle Man time, and Needle Man actually reminds me a lot of Metal Man because of the way he fires his projectiles, but he has one key thing that Metal Man doesn't, and that's the ability to, like, kind of shoot the head, you know, throw his head off type of thing with the spring on it. But other than that, he still kind of, you know, he doesn't, he jumps around at random, unlike what Metal Man would do. Metal Man would just kind of stay in the same place unless you invaded his territory pretty much and got close to him. But Needle Man will jump around at random and still fire his needles pretty much in different directions depending upon where you're standing. But he's actually pretty difficult to try to judge and try to jump over all the needles, all the spikes. Only real thing about it is, of course, unless you get hit by him himself, like his head and stuff like that, the little individual needles, thankfully, don't do a ton of damage. But since we were able to pick up an energy tank during the whole course of his level, if we needed to use it, we would have had that available to us. Okay, you got the needle cannon, which will actually be useful if I was using it, you know, against Snake Man. But since Snake Man's already done, and, you know, now, whatever, so... Anyway, here comes Shadow Man, which... Shadow Man is actually one of the more interesting ones, more sporadic in pattern, hard to judge exactly what's going on. And I kind of questioned when I first started the stage. I'm like, is this Shadow Man stage? Because it's just like the big giant red flowing waterfall in the background and throughout most of the stage. I was just like, exactly does that have to do with Shadow exactly? But either way, of course, just keep going through it. And here's our second battle with Proto Man. Or Breakman, or you know, whatever he was disguised at the time. And on an even playing field, on this a flat ground, it's even easier to judge, and easier to dodge his weaponry and his jumping and such, and just following his patterns is even easier. It was a little bit more difficult when we did it in hardband stage, just because of, it was kind of that, like, mountain style, like, multiple platforms you had to worry about. As we continue on with, of course, more of the giant red waterfall, and now we have darkness, which, you know, at least makes more sense about shadows, at least. Which I always thought they could have done something really cool with Shadow Man stage. You know, just thinking about, you know, different things they could have done. Maybe just made it that you only control, like, the shadow or something, and, like, it's kind of in the background, and you're controlling just the shadow, and yet the judge jumps and such differently, just because you'd be controlling both. You know, you'd just be controlling the shadow. And, you know, think about the way judging how distance and all worked, you know, I think would have been cool or something to do with it. It's just something randomly I've thrown out there that I was thinking about. At least while, you know, I've been playing this game especially, I'm just like, come on, they could have done something really cool with that. And now we have a whole bunch of pitfalls that we have to worry about falling into the red water on the bottom here, and we have these parachuting guys, which are always fun to deal with, because they just kind of keep falling and keep taking them out. They're pretty easy. They're just there. They're one of those enemies in Mega Man that are just there so that you end up hitting them when you try to make a jump. You try to make it, and you're like, oh, I think I can make it. I think I can jump right under them, and you end up hitting them and fall right down the pit and end up losing a life. And it's just like, damn you, Capcom, for the way you designed that, putting that monster right there. Okay, Shadow Man time. Shadow Man has two things. He shoots, of course, his, like, shadow stars, his throwing stars, as well as he likes to jump and slide, similar, of course, to Mega Man slide, so that's the hardest thing to deal with, is dealing with that slide of his. That's the hardest thing to dodge, and I'm more concerned always with that. When he throws his throwing stars, I have a harder time judging it, because I'm kind of more focused on just dodging the... I'm always jumping ahead of time, trying to get ready to dodge the slide as I just got hit there by it. Come on, he's almost done here. A couple more hits. One more. There we go. Shadow Man is completed. And now that we have Shadow Man's ability officially Spark Man would be officially weak against Shadow Man's throwing star ability. In case you were wondering, Shadow Man is actually weak to Top Man's top spin, which is always humorous anytime you mention top spin, because of course it's considered one of the absolute worst weapons in Mega Man history. And from defeating Shadow Man, we get Shadow Blade and turn purplish pink. I always wondered that, with Quick Man and Mega Man 2, you turned pink, and I was just like, what the heck does that have to do with Quick Man? And now in this one, you turn purple from Shadow Man, who of course was like blue. So it's kind of funny. Okay, next level, and here we go with Spark Man. Which, of course, with electric-based type level, of course, there's going to be lots of different enemies they can, of course, use with that. Various enemies that are going to, of course, throw lightning at me or spark at me, like that one in particular just did. Like I said, since we have Shadow Man's ability, we could use that on Spark Man. It would just mop him up in just a matter of a few seconds. But even with an electric-based level, we still have Hammer Joes and such that we have to deal with, or whatever they're called. I think they're called Hammer Joes. Kind of like Sniper Joe from, other Mega Man games. Here's some of the harder jumping in the game. You gotta time your jumping just right with these platforms, because as soon as you jump on them, of course, they're starting to head towards the spiked filled ceiling. So you have to time your jumps more, carefully in terms of making it. If you needed health, though, you can jump up there and use the rush coil if needed, in order to grab an extra little boost of health. Hate these stupid little flipping guys. They're just one of those worthless enemies that are just in there just to annoy me. Make a long, long fall here, apparently. There we go. Now we gotta deal with random trash piles, as if, like, random cars have been crushed into cubes. We have to deal with them now. Work our way down and slide underneath this big thing here. There we go. Now we have more of these hard jumping things with the upward platforms, and of course now we have another enemy we have to deal with, the random screw that I don't understand. And here we go, it's actually time for the boss battle. Spark Man, here we go. And Spark Man's actually one of the easier ones to deal with in the game, even though you have to deal with him on like this multi-leveled platform type thing. But he has pretty much one ability, and that's he does a spark shot that does that spread shot of sparks, which is pretty easy to dodge, and then he throws out a giant spark at you, which is a little bit harder, of course, to dodge, especially depending upon the angle in which he throws it at you. But that one does a good amount of damage, but still not a ton. So really just, the thing that hurts you the most in all these ones is the fact that if the guy actually runs into you, jumps on top of you, or whatever, that does a lot more damage than any of the weapons they ever use. But Sparkman's one of the easier ones, definitely, to have to deal with. Not the easiest. We haven't gotten to the easiest yet, actually, but one of the easier ones, and like I had already mentioned, if we had used Shadow Man's ability, it would have even taken less time than it did there. But you can definitely see that they take a lot more shots than they did in Mega Man 2. It takes a lot more of just the regular blaster shots to actually be able to do damage to them. And of course I get Spark Shock for doing Spark Man's level. Okay, next one up is Gemini Man, which is not one of my favorites. This is one of the harder boss battles. I always have had trouble dealing with Gemini Man in particular. This is one of my favorite songs, but one of my least favorite levels, I must say, just because I hate dealing with Gemini Man. He's one of the more difficult ones because you have to be really, really quick. His pattern is extremely easy to dodge, but you have to be really, really quick in order to actually be able to hit him. And he's weak, of course, against Needle Man, which I think I mentioned earlier as well. You gotta deal with these random flame things. I'm not really sure exactly in, like, are we in a snow place or in a crystal built place, some weird crystal-style cave? Because we have random penguins hanging around, random penguin robots, which I always kind of found humorous. And of course, you got these things dropping fireballs, which they're not really hard to dodge, but I always found the penguins actually quite funny, and they throw eggs at you, which is even funnier. As I work my way over and jump through this area. Okay. And all of a sudden now, even though we've been fighting him, Proto Man appears or whatever and opens up the ground area so that we actually can continue on to the next part of Gemini Man stage, which is kind of funny. You've fought him a bunch of times, but then he helps you, so it's more or less more mysteries. Now you have even more stuff you're questioning, whether or not he's good or bad or whatever. And through a good chunk of this stage, we have to deal with these things. There's just a whole bunch of these random, like, pod-type weird things, like this, you know, kind of weird. Like, kind of reminds me of something that would be in, like, a Metroid game or something. I don't really know why, but that's kind of what it reminds me of. And when you break open the little pods, little tiny little blue things come out of them, and you have to kill them or else. And the only thing good about them is, of course, like some of the other random small stupid enemies throughout Mega Man, they drop good items. As I work my way through here in order to make my way to that ladder. There we go. Climb up the ladder to continue on in Gemini Man stage. And I'm going to pull out Rush Coil here in order to get up here, in order to just bypass some of the harder stuff. I can just take me less time to get through this area by using Rush Coil. Kill a whole bunch of these random stupid guys. There we go. Continuing on, now we have a big open area, which we have the giant super penguin, which, you know, is one of those kind of like mini-boss type things, kind of like the giant fish in Mega Man 2's Bubble Man stage. That's pretty much what it reminds me of.